Ousmane Dieng does it again. The Bucks pick up some momentum and go into the All-Star break on a high note, taking down the Thunder. We recap the performance coming up after this on today's Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. My name is Justin Garcia. We thank you for making this your first stop of the day each and every day, and for also helping make the Locked On Network the number one sports podcasting network in the industry. You can hear me every single game on the Bucks Radio Network, which I just exited, and now we are here with you, rejoicing in another big Ousmane Dieng performance. We'll get to the details in just a moment. After we remind you, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Create an account, get the Game Time app, use the code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. So the Bucks go into Oklahoma City and take down the Thunder. Let's rewind to a month ago when the NBA had Rivals Week. Maybe not quite a month ago, but we had Rivals Week, and we all laughed at the Bucks and the Oklahoma City Thunder. Our rivals. Maybe there is actually something there, because last year, of course, the Bucks win in the NBA Cup final in a game where their defense handcuffed the Thunder to their worst offensive showing of the season. And tonight, the Bucks do the same thing to the Thunder, only the difference being they do this one without Damian Lillard, and defensively, especially without Giannis, without the likes of Brook Lopez. We even saw Andre Jackson Jr. get out there and start to stir some things up. But obviously the key takeaways from this one, or takeaway, is Ousmane Dieng, who went up against his former team. We learned about an hour before tip-off he was going to be placed in the starting lineup tonight with no Miles Turner available. So Ousmane Dieng gets out there against his former mates, and Ousmane Dieng, I think, continues to blow all of us away. I don't know how critical I would say we were of the addition. It was more of a guarded, let's not get our hopes up too much, in the sense that, look, the Oklahoma City Thunder have had an incredible track record through the years of finding and developing talent, young talent at that, and turning them into NBA players. If the Oklahoma City Thunder are saying we don't see something, we don't see enough in this guy, we have pieces that are greater than him, we have guys that are in front of him and preventing him from really growing in our organization. If they're saying we're ready to move on from this, there should be at least some skepticism of, well, I don't know. If he were an incredible two-way player, if there was more raw untapped potential there, I do believe a franchise like the Thunder would do everything in their power to find a spot for him and continue to develop him. But frankly, sometimes it just comes down to a roster crunch situation, and you just don't have that room. Now, I had talked with a few people leading up to this with Oklahoma City. I heard this from some others that were on the trip as well, that they got to the arena early for this one because of what you saw, they being these individuals, not necessarily the team. Because of what you saw last night and how pivotal Ousmane Dieng was in that performance against the Magic, Cam Thomas as well. But okay, we saw some flashes from Ousmane Dieng in this game. I want to go investigate this and talk with some people around the organization and just see, like, hey, why did you guys cut the cord on him? Like, what am I missing here? Because maybe it's just in relation to the rest of the players on the Bucks roster, specifically at the small forward position. Ousmane Dieng is going to look like an all-star, and I've joked about this with one of the Bucks beat writers. Ousmane Dieng has already looked like an all-NBA caliber player. But what a lot of these people who I trust heard today was he was a well-liked guy in Oklahoma City. There were some questions about the work ethic, I think, compared to guys like Shea and Jalen Williams and others that have really thrived with Oklahoma City. But everybody in the organization liked him. There was no denying the talent. It was just, we think some other guys are moving past him and they're outworking him. And let's not forget he was drafted one spot in front of Jalen Williams in the draft. So that was kind of the knock. It's been very early. There's been none of that. But again, it just shows you how much we all underestimated the importance of having a small forward, first and foremost, on this roster. But a guy with the tools like Ousmane Dieng and what he is able to bring to this team and potentially unlock, where I think we've all reached the point, earlier in the week, Camille and I went through what path should you take? Should you get to the point where you are playing for the play-in tournament? Should you get to the point where you're just shutting it down and playing for a high lottery pick? It is very clear the latter is not going to happen, barring something unforeseen, barring injuries and health issues popping up. This team is going for it. And it sounds like Giannis is going to be back Friday night, next Friday against New Orleans, in New Orleans against the Pelicans. So this team is saying, we like the way we're playing. And that was kind of the message from Darvin Ham, who, by the way, coached the team tonight with Doc Rivers away from the team, attending a funeral in Chicago. But the message was, we like this group, like this current version of the group. We love what we're seeing here. We like the vibes around this team. And we feel like we've got a good mix, and we're starting to kind of find some of those things. There are some very specific things that the Bucks have definitely found here in these last 6 games. And again, this is the danger of it, is we're going to compare 6 games to 47 games, basically. I understand in terms of the volume of the sample size, it ain't great. But there is one very key specific takeaway in what the biggest differences are between these games and what we saw leading up to these last 6 games, which, by the way, have been played without Giannis. So I do want to touch on that and the important games, most important games remaining on the schedule for this Bucks team as we start to move forward here. So some numbers that are really going to stand out. We'll share those coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you now about our friends over at Indeed. It is, time to talk to you now about our friends over at FanDuel. The winter games are here. If you're anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. That's why following the winter games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on sports you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to the action. The drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get intense fast, speed skating races decided by inches, hockey games that feel different right from the opening face-off. Even niche events have become must-watch when you're fully locked into the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. And now it is time to talk to you about our friends over at Indeed. Hiring isn't just about finding someone willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. If you want candidates who match exactly what you're looking for, Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the move, because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who fit your specific criteria, like skills, certifications, and even location. If I were hiring, I wouldn't just want someone who could help. I'd want someone with real experience who can jump right in, and that's what you'll love about Indeed. You can get specific. You can target exactly what you need. It saves you time because you're spending less energy sorting through the mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. But here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I have been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That is Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Do it the right way with Indeed. And we also want to remind you about our Everydayer Club here on the Locked On Network. It comes with perks. You get access to our Discord channel, which was buzzing during the game itself. You get ad-free episodes of Locked On Bucks as well. You can find the link to sign up for the Everydayer Club in the show notes of today's episode. So a couple of numbers that stand out that we were mentioning about this team. To me, it starts on the glass. And I think I mentioned this on a win earlier in the week, but there's this notion of teams are going bigger. And I don't necessarily believe that to be true. I think there are teams that have gone bigger. There are teams like the Houston Rockets, when you look at their front court, especially when Steven Adams was healthy, that are certainly playing bigger than they were and saying, we're just going to impose our will. We're going to dominate on the glass. We're going to be a physical team. We're going to be a bigger team. Even last year at times, and this year too, when you look at some of the lineups of, well, the Bucks could theoretically be playing Giannis and Bobby Portis and Kyle Kuzma, or Giannis and Miles Turner and Bobby Portis, like jumbo packages. We've seen them roll out in the past in the days of Brook Lopez. But that's not what's happening here, to be clear. Teams aren't necessarily playing bigger. Teams are just not playing smaller. And that's the big takeaway to me, is you cannot play small in this league anymore. It is hard to stay on the court, especially at the guard position, if you are a smaller player. And coming into the season, the Bucks were small. The lineup that they believed in, and that frankly we all believed in, and said, yep, I understand it's a small sample size, and it was the 8 games leading into the playoffs. It was the playoff series itself, which wasn't a great showing against the Indiana Pacers, but that group looked good. And John Horst and his front office staff believes in it. You know what? I believe in it too. Those are their best players, and we kept clamoring for, these are the guys you got to play. Lean into playing these guys in that playoff series down the stretch. They did in the regular season. They didn't until it was too late in the playoffs. We think that's a reason why it didn't work out. Yada, yada, yada. But it was a small group. And I think every one of us had that planted in the back of their mind. Like, yeah, I understand the numbers, but who's the small forward in this group? And you did have a safety blanket early in the season, which, go back to October. And what if I made these 2 statements to you? Like, number one, you can make a case that Taurean Prince is the under-the-radar most important player on this team. Obviously, Giannis is the best player. Obviously, there's other players that are more talented and more skilled than Taurean Prince. But look at how much things started to fall apart when Taurean Prince exited, because you did not have a true small forward anymore. And Taurean Prince had enough size. Taurean Prince knew how to rebound. You go back to his days at Baylor when he gave that symposium on how to out-rebound your opponent at postgame of the NCAA tournament. But he could rebound. He could knock down open threes. And, he's physical. Is he going to stay in front of the quickest, most athletic threes? No. But he has that old man game and the craftiness defensively where he was a very important and valuable player. He's gone. And everything really started to go south from that point forward. The Bucks have been a disaster in a lot of areas this season. There's no way to sugarcoat it. But the biggest ones have been the true shooting attempts. And, I will get into the details on this forum because, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, all of you are sickos that are into it in the advanced numbers and all of the details. But true shooting attempts, I don't need to tell you what they are. For those of you that do need it, fine. True shooting attempts is, it's the best way to view how many shots are we getting versus the opponent. You take your field goal attempts, you take your free throw attempts, multiply the free throw attempts by 0.44, add that to the field goal attempts number. And that's your true shooting attempts. It takes into account your and ones and, well, he got fouled on this shot. I mean, it was a good look. That should count as something here that we're looking at. So that's what we mean by true shooting attempts. And the Bucks have been one of the worst teams all season long in the difference in true shot attempts from them versus true shot attempts from their opponent. Now, it's good news, bad news. They have started to get better. They're still tied for last, but the number is starting to shrink and what the difference is. But here's why it's important. That determines everything in the league this day and age, because offenses are so good, and the way the game is officiated, it is advantage offense. These are the most gifted scorers we've ever seen in the history of this game. It doesn't mean they're the greatest players we've seen, but we're seeing 7-footers that can handle the ball and shoot. Ousmane Dieng, who I know isn't a 7-footer, but look at some of the handles he displayed tonight and his ability. He had a catch high, keep high corner three that he knocked down tonight. Like, that's the norm for players Ousmane Dieng size and larger now. So it's the most gifted offensive scorers we have seen in one setting in league history. You don't want to give opposing offenses more opportunities and chances. And that's where true shot attempts and the difference becomes so very important, because that's exactly what the Bucks have been doing this season. With this performance tonight, the Bucks are now tied for last in that difference with the Washington Wizards. But here's all the teams that are near the bottom. They're negative 4.2. So in other words, on a nightly basis, your opponent is taking more than 4 true shot attempts per game than you are. The Bucks and Wizards are tied for 30th. Clippers have started to find some footing similar to what we're seeing for the Bucks, but you need a longer sample size like we've seen from the Clippers. Clippers, 3rd worst. The Mavericks are 4th worst. The Bulls are down there. The Nuggets and Lakers are the outliers, although the Lakers' numbers have suggested all season long, hey, they're not actually a good team despite the wins that they're picking up. But that's the company you're in. The Jazz, the Kings, the Pacers, the Nets, those are all teams that are in the bottom. The best teams at finding that difference. The Detroit Pistons right now are number 1. They're taking nearly 5 more true shot attempts than their opponent. The Knicks are 2nd best. The Celtics are 3rd best. The Rockets are 4th best. The Suns are 5th best. These are all really good teams. So you got to be good at this. And where the Bucks' problem has come so far, they're minus 4.2. The Bucks' issue has been their opponent true shot attempts, right? They're not getting a whole lot. Their opponent is getting a ton of them. And the Bucks are taking the 2nd fewest in the league. So here's where rebounding factors in there. Rebounding, steals, your defense, all of it. That leads to your true shot attempts. If you are not going to get offensive rebounds, if you are not going to force turnovers, you are not going to force extra shots. And conversely, if you're not going to be a good defensive rebounding team, if you're not going to protect the ball, you are going to give your opponent more true shot attempts. So again, it's not an apples to apples. It's not a like for like here. But in the 47 games leading up to this stretch where the Bucks have suddenly won 5 out of 6 games, the Bucks ranked 29th in offensive rebounding rate. 25.4%. So in other words, every time the Bucks miss a shot, 75% of the time the opponent is getting the rebound. They ranked 20th in defensive rebounding rate at 60. We'll round it up to 69%. So every time the opponent missed a shot, that opponent or the Bucks were getting the rebound 69% of the time. I just told you 75% of the time for the Bucks opponents to 69% of the time that they're getting the defensive rebound. And it led to a 48% overall rebounding rate. So less than half of the time you were getting the rebound. 29th in the league. Over the course of the last 6 games, we have seen this team embrace the offensive glass. They've done a better job at protecting the ball. You know, that Magic game the first time was not good with 20 turnovers. They won the turnover battle tonight against the Thunder. But they've really leaned into offensive rebounding and cleaning up the defensive glass, ending possessions. Don't give your opponent second chance opportunities. 17th in offensive rebounding rate in these last 6 games. 30%. So they went from 25 to 30%. 4th in defensive rebounding rate, which really had become the norm under Mike Budenholzer in that era of Bucks basketball. 75% of the time, they're getting the defensive rebound versus 69%. And 7th in overall rebounding rate at 53%. They have cleaned up the margins. They're holding their own in turnovers. By and large, they've been okay there. But they have been a much, much better rebounding team over the course of these 6 games. And that goes a long way, as we just pointed out, and what it means for the true shot attempts and how imperative that is in juicing your offense, in limiting the amount of points, especially points per 100 that your opponent is going to put up there. That is the easiest way to start to take a big step forward. And the way to do that is to play with more size. Early in the season, we talked about it on one of these shows. Look, rebounding hasn't been good. And the issue that the Bucks ran into more often than not was on the wing. Yeah, you got Giannis and Miles Turner and guys that have size and 7-footers. Everyone else that's on the floor is 6'4", 6'3". And it was the opponent wings, the opponent 2-guard and small forward that was usually winning their battle on the glass because you were playing smaller. There has clearly been this shift and this recognition of, okay, we can't play small. We have to find ways. And look, part of it, it's easy now because Giannis is gone, and let's wait and see what this looks like when this team is fully healthy. Gone as in not playing. Don't worry. Don't jump to conclusions. But it's been easy to work in Jericho Sims because of that. But let's see how you continue to work him in, because we have been critical of Jericho Sims and the lack of offense. There's no denying they have optimized how to use him and found the right spots to use him, where to put him to succeed. He has been a roller. He's been shooting and finishing at the rim, and he has been dominating on the glass. Ousmane Dieng to finally have a 3, as we heard from Doc Rivers after the game against the Magic, of, hey, we finally got a 3. We finally got a guy we can throw out there on the wing, and he's a big one, too. Ousmane Dieng with a career night. 19 points, a career high. The 11 rebounds, a career high. 4 blocked shots. You saw all the tools that he brings. It's just like we said with Cam Thomas after that game against Orlando. It's not going to look like this every night. Fine, I get that. But it looked like this 0 nights before this. So if you're telling me it's going to look like this 1 out of every 4, 1 out of every 3 nights, you know what? That's a much better rate than 0 nights, which is what this team was getting basically for 40 games. So there's suddenly this danger now of, man, I'm starting to talk myself into this and starting to see, how would this work with this? Ousmane Dieng playing next to a Ryan Rollins and a Giannis and a Miles Turner. Man, look at the rebounding possibilities and defense that you're going to bring with that type of lineup, and whoever the 4th player is. Cam Thomas as your scorer off the bench. Like, it is suddenly starting to feel like pieces are potentially falling into place for this group. Now, there are some very important games that are on the horizon, and that is going to determine more than anything for this group. But I think the message from tonight is, you know what? You can tell me who cares. You can tell me it was the last game before the All-Star break for the Thunder. They didn't care. They weren't playing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They weren't playing Jalen Williams. The first 3 games of this win streak, or the 5 out of 6, it came against really bad teams in the Bulls and the Pelicans and the Pacers. You can point out all of that, to which I would say, I don't care. I've seen this team get run off the floor by a Timberwolves team that was playing without Ant and Rudy Gobert, and I believe who else was out? Mike Conley, somebody else. I've seen this team 2 times in the span of 10 days get run off the floor by the Denver Nuggets, who are playing without their top 5 or 5 of their top 7 players. I've seen this team as recently as, 3 weeks ago, look like they were absolutely dead in the water and one of the worst teams in the league. So to see this, even if it's against bad teams, even if it's only 6 games, it tells you, okay, there's at least something in there. Can we continue to harness this? The schedule is the most important part for that. So we'll take a look at those upcoming remaining games that I referenced coming up after this on today's Locked On Bucks. Well, there's nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, well, that's always been the difficult part. That's why Game Time's become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with the fans. You pull up the Game Time app, pick an upcoming NBA game, and you get tickets loaded within minutes. You see the all-in price up front, too, so there's no surprise fees when you get to checkout. You can even see a view from your seat before buying, guiding you through the decision process. They got zone deals where you choose the section and Game Time picks the seats. You save. Great last-minute options, too, with NBA tickets that show up at solid prices, and everything is quick, intuitive, and stress-free from start to finish. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. That is Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today, and remember, it is gametime.co, not gametime.com. So the schedule, 7 games left for the Bucks. And by the way, like, we haven't mentioned a lot of numbers from tonight's game. Ousmane Dieng was fantastic. 19, 11, and 6 assists, 4 blocks, and a steal. You had 7 double-digit scores, 17 from A.J. Green, 15 from Bobby, and 12 rebounds. 2 Pete Nance with 11 points. Cam Thomas, just 12. Only 20 minutes for Cam Thomas. There's a lot of, I think, upset fans in the comments, too, that it was only 20 minutes from Cam Thomas. I was fine. Cam Thomas he's not a 40-minute guy. And especially once Giannis comes back, Cam Thomas, his ultimate role is a supplemental scorer for this team. So, 30 minutes at this point with the guys that are out, sure, you can make a case for that. But you know what? Everything worked tonight. So I'm fine with what we saw from this group in the 7 double-digit scores, the efficiency, every single category the Bucks won. Points in the paint, 44-28. Offensive rebounds, 15-14. They outscored the Thunder by 7 in second chance points. Turnovers, I mentioned. Oklahoma City is one of the best in the league at protecting the ball and forcing turnovers. Obviously, no Shea and Hartenstein and Jalen Williams, big components there. But 11-16. Bucks with fewer turnovers scored more points off of turnovers. They hit more threes. They shot at a higher rate. So literally, every single category, save for free throws, the Bucks won. Everything went their way tonight. They're 23-30 now on the season. And I don't believe, I was looking at this earlier in the night, I don't believe playoff status has updated everything yet and has not taken not only this game, but the win against Orlando last night into account either, and they have not. So playoff status still has the Bucks at 21-30. They track, look at remaining schedule, all of the metrics behind the scenes, the Raptor and everything else. They use that, put it up against what your remaining schedule is, and come up with, okay, by the numbers, here's the percent chance. They're still 2 games behind on the Bucks, so this number is going to grow, but they have the Bucks with a 13% chance to get the 10 seed right now, 6% chance to get the 9 seed. But it's a 78% chance to miss the playoffs. It is a higher percentage chance than the Bulls. That number is going to change because you are now even with the Bulls, and the Bulls have made it very clear that they are going to be tanking the rest of the way. So the most important games that are remaining for the Bucks, and there's a couple of ways to look at this, but it really boils down to 12 or 13, depending on how you choose to view the Memphis Grizzlies. But the most important games you have left are really 2 different sets. Anything you have against those teams that are currently in the play-in tournament, because the reality is the Bucks ceiling at this point is probably the 8th seed. The Magic, you can get the tiebreaker by way of splitting those games. You're still 5 games behind Orlando in the loss column. It's not impossible. It's a lot of work. You're only 3 games back of Miami. You're 1 game behind Charlotte. You're tied with Atlanta in losses. The reality is it's probably the 8th seed is your ceiling unless you just go nuclear the rest of the way. So the important games that you have left, any game against Orlando, any game against Miami, any game against Charlotte, which are done, and you've won that head-to-head, and any game against Atlanta. They have 5 of those, and 3 of them are at home. You are 1-1 against Orlando. The remaining game is at home. You are 0-1 against Miami. You have 1 at home and 1 on the road. You've already won the series with Charlotte, and you have 2 games remaining with Atlanta, 1 at home and 1 on the road. Those are the important ones because of having the tiebreaker hanging over those teams. The other important ones are the games against those tank commanders. And the Bucks have, as I mentioned, 7, potentially 8, depending on where you place Memphis in that mix. But here's the other thing, where maybe the schedule gods, we didn't realize it at the time, they really looked down on the Bucks and helped them out here. You go to the final week of April. 3 of the final 5 games the Bucks play are home against the Memphis Grizzlies, in Brooklyn against the Nets, home against the Brooklyn Nets. None of those are back-to-backs. The Brooklyn game is the front half of back-to-back. I take that back. But the game sandwiched in between is in Detroit against the Pistons. That will be game number 80 for both the Bucks and the Detroit Pistons. And as of this moment, the Pistons are 6 games clear of the Celtics in the loss column. So there is a very strong chance when you get to that final week, you got a horrendous Grizzlies team that at that point may have already started to shut things down. Right now, Memphis is 3 games worse than the Bucks in the 8th spot, 8th best record right now. But with that Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, with the Desmond Bane trade over the summer, they're probably going to start to see, can we sink even lower here? So that week, Memphis at home, Brooklyn on the road, Detroit on the road, night 2 of a back-to-back, but maybe Detroit has nothing to play for at that point. And then Brooklyn at home 2 days later. You wrap up the season on the road in Philadelphia, but you've got 8 games if we include Memphis against those types of teams. The New Orleans Pelicans, the 1 game coming out of the All-Star break, 1 game against the Indiana Pacers, 2 games up against the Brooklyn Nets. You still got 2 games with the Utah Jazz, and then the Memphis Grizzlies. It is imperative that the Bucks go at worst 6-1 in those games. Ideally 7-0, and frankly, there should be nothing stopping you from going 7-0. If you play largely like you have in these 2 games, and it's not to say the Bucks have played perfect, but if you play like that, you are going to win those games. If you take it from them early, you're going to win. If you let those teams hang around, like that's where it starts to get tricky and complicated. That's what nearly bit Atlanta in the backside against Utah. That's what happened to Miami. Like if you're going to let this linger on, then we're going to try to win. Even if our coach isn't calling timeouts and we're sitting guys in the second half of games, other guys are playing for spots. Other guys are going to start to hit shots. If you take it from them early, you got it. You need to go 6-1 at worst. You can go 7-0 in those games if you win on the margins and clean things up. If you go 7-0 in those games, that puts you to 30 wins, right? So you'd be 30-30. I know not sequentially, but you'd be 30-30 with those 7 wins, meaning you have 22 games left. And the reality is 39 wins is probably the 10th seed in the Eastern Conference. That is routinely what we have seen. And I believe playoff status projects the Atlanta Hawks to get the 10th seed right now at 39-43. So 39 is going to get you there. So in your final 22 games, you would need to go 9-13. That's entirely doable, right? But you have to take care of business in those 7-8 games against those teams. 8 if we include Memphis. So you got to win those games. You got to go 6-1, or if we're including Memphis, 7-1 in those games. Beat the teams you're supposed to beat. And that's the tricky part about the schedule, is with the remaining games, with the 29 games left, 8 are against those teams, 5 are against those teams that are playing teams right near you. So that's basically half of your schedule that's left. So whenever you hear, well, what have the Bucks shown? And look, you have to see more than these 6 games put together to really have confidence in this group. But you've seen it for 2 weeks, and if half of your schedule is that, there is no reason to not buy into, yes, I do think they could do something like 16-13 the rest of the way. Maybe even slightly better. And if you're 16-13, that's 39 wins. That's 39-43. So look, there is a path. I know there's a large portion that are still going to say, why are we doing this? Play for a high lottery pick, especially with the talent in this draft. And look, I get it, especially those top 6 guys in the draft. Here's the other thing, though. Where you are right now in the standings, there's already 8 teams beneath you. And barring a catastrophic injury to multiple players, you're not going to catch those teams. You're not catching Sacramento. You're not catching Washington. You're not catching Indiana. You're not catching Brooklyn. You're not catching Utah. Maybe you could drop down 1 or 2 slots. Doesn't guarantee that you're drafting 6th. You could still fall back 4 spots. And I still choose to believe if this is what Giannis wants, if this is what the front office wants, and especially with more young guys added to the mix in Ousmane Dieng, we want a culture of winning and we want those habits. If that's what you want, I don't disagree with it. And Camille and I have mentioned this before. There is a notion, too, of the basketball gods. And look, getting to the 10 seed, that doesn't necessarily mean you're in the playoffs, because the reality is you got to push for the 8th seed. If this is what we're going for, you got to push for 8. Because the difference between finishing 9th and 8th is monumental. If you finish on that 9-10 line, you have to win 2 straight games to get into the playoffs. If you finish 8th, you got to go 1-1 to get the 8th seed. And if you finish 10th, you got to win 2 straight games, and you got to do both of them on the road. So you got to push beyond that 10 spot. But even getting into that mix, even getting into 8, it does not guarantee you're a playoff team. And I still choose to believe there is justice in this world after all. And there is this notion that the basketball gods, if you push for it, they will reward you. And there's a scenario where the Bucks get the 10 seed, they lose their first game, or they win and they lose their second game. They don't make the playoffs. They're in the lottery. And somehow the Bucks jump into the top 4 and New Orleans wins the lottery, or New Orleans finishes second. And you get the best of both worlds, where you got to experience postseason and you were a team that went for it and tried to develop that culture, and you're still getting a high draft pick. But look, I know we touched on a lot of big picture stuff with this win tonight, not so much the game individually, but look, you cannot say enough good things about Ousmane Dieng, and I don't want to make a season out of 2 games, because again, this is the important part. There are going to be valleys. It's not going to be all peaks. Cam Thomas was perfectly fine. Frankly, what you saw from Cam Thomas tonight, by the way, plus 15, but 20 minutes, 20 minutes and 5 of 13 shooting. The reality is you're going to see more of those stat lines than you're going to see what happened last night. But you're at least starting to get those, and now you just have more options and more ways to play and more size added to the mix. And frankly, you were getting none of it at the small forward position. You were getting none of it in terms of that volume scoring in that premium position of a guard, not a combo guard, but a guard that can score at a high volume like that. I'll take the valleys for the peaks that are going to help boost this team, and especially when number 34 is going to be back relatively soon, and that is going to change a lot for this group. We're on to the All-Star game and weekend itself. I'm very curious. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. How many of you are actually going to watch All-Star weekend and the mayor in the 3-point shootout, Bobby Portis? There's a lot of Bucks and Milwaukee ties. You got Bobby in it. We got Con Knipple in the 3-point shootout, and Dame is in the 3-point shootout as well. Giannis was officially ruled out of the All-Star game, replaced by De'Aaron Fox. Don't get me started on the East and West and Team USA stars, Team USA stripes, all of it. But Giannis is out of the All-Star game. So do you plan on watching All-Star weekend and the All-Star game itself? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We may have another bonus show for you around All-Star festivities Sunday or Saturday evening. It's TBD on that front, but we will let you know on social when to look for that. Otherwise, we're on to next week where we start to take an even closer look at the second half schedule for this Bucks team. All right, that'll do it for today's show. Thanks to everybody that jumped in to the live stream of this. I know it came together rather late, literally and figuratively, late into the night, as it is well past 11 o'clock and at the last minute in the game. We said, hey, let's just do this and go live because of some scheduling issues with Frank and Camille. So thanks to everybody who jumped in on this. I want to remind you, as always, if you are one of those true everydayers, you can still sign up for the Everydayer Club. You get ad-free episodes of Locked On Bucks. You get notified when we go live if you follow the show, and you get access to the Discord channel as well. You can still sign up for it. You can find the link to do so in the show notes of today's episode. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever national 24/7 NBA YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you make that your second listen of the night. Locked On NBA and NBA Game Nights. That's going to do it for tonight's show. We'll talk to you guys once again next week on Locked On Bucks.